Dhruti Shah. You are an award-winning journalist, writer, producer, and storyteller. You have more than 10 years experience working for the BBC. For those non-British, is the British Broadcasting Corporation. And today we're here to talk about your book, Bear Markets and Beyond, a bestiary of business terms. Dhruti, this is the most fun finance book I have ever read in my life. Like most of the financial books that I read are about greed. How can I earn more money? How can I beat the market, this and that. But this one didn't show me how to beat the market, but it gave a big smile on my face the whole time that I was reading it. So congratulations for writing this amazing book.
Thank you. I mean, to be honest with you, Bear Markets and Beyond, it literally is there to entertain, but also inform at the same time. So I'm so super glad that's your response to it. I've never said to anybody, oh, I am a financial expert and I'm going to tell you how to, do this, that, and the other. It's just, no, this is what there's some really fun words out there. And I think nature's super important. So we've got a bestiary of business terms, and a bestiary is about animal references. So in the book, it's about, you can have such a safari in this financial jungle, so why not have some fun with it? So I'm super glad that you've said that.
And I tell you what, don't feel bad about not being a financial expert, because 80% of the financial experts do not beat the markets. so, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But Dhruti, can you take us back to you? Can you give us some information about your background? I mean, you are a journalist, you write story, you work for the BBC. Take us into your world for a little bit.
It's a very peculiar world. I'm not quite sure if you want to sort of join in, but it does involve lots and lots of different things. I'm not a typical journalist in that I have one specialist beat. So I've been doing journalism since I was a child, to be honest with you. That was my dream. I was 8 years old and I was like, I want to tell the world about stories. And I think I was just very, very dogged. One thing you'll learn about me is I do keep now using lots of animal references. It's a problem having written this book, but I was very dogged about my dream and trying to find out a way to become a journalist. I still quite enjoy telling stories in lots of different ways. So what I've done in my career, and I've been at the BBC for 13 years, and I've worked at the BBC News website, which encompasses a lot of different stories. I've worked in Washington as a social news writer. So that means finding stories on the social beat, for example, via Reddit or Twitter or Facebook, but then finding the people behind those stories and behind those posts and explaining to the world, okay, well, this will resonate because of this reason. This was, for example, this is what makes a good death. So for example, someone will post a picture or video online and it will become very, very popular. But what I will then do is look at sort of, I guess, the psychology of it in terms of why are so many people finding this particular post of interest? How are they responding to it? And what can we, as the world, learn from it? I've worked in investigations. So in the BBC, we have a very, I think it's actually the world's longest running current affairs program, and it's called Panorama. So I worked there for a bit doing in-depth investigations, uncovering hidden archive pages. I work in, to a degree, online forensic investigations right now. So I work in a team called the User Generated Content Hub at the BBC, which is a news gathering. And when I say user generated content, it's a very clunky term. It's been around for a while, but it means what some people call eyewitness media. So people at the heart of the stories, posting and sharing, what affects them. So we will be doing things like earthquakes, and if a correspondent isn't on the ground, then I will be one of the first producers to try and track down and find out, is this actually happening, and is this worthy of the world being aware of, and can we find people who are there and are able to verify. You also have some darker elements of that, clearly, because the world of social isn't always positive and fun. So you will have, in the past I have covered stories around war and terrorism, so the beat that I have and the stories that I've done are very, very wide. But then saying that, the other week I was doing International Women's Day, and I did a story about science illustrators and female science illustrators and how they're helping us demystify the world of COVID, and that's really important, because how do you illustrate a pandemic that's basically affected the entire world? Especially when you have people in different languages, different countries. So with me, my stories, especially at the BBC, are cover a whole range. Before that, I worked in local newspapers, so I'm what they would call in the UK, although I don't know if you say this internationally, a hack by training, and that would be a reporter who would go out in a local community and knock on doors and find out what was happening. And I think that was very good grounding as a journalist. And in other weird careers that I've had, like more short, I've spent less time in them. Journalism has been my life, as it were, but I worked in the civil service, so in the government for a little bit. When I first left university, I worked in children's publishing, which I think it was really helpful in terms of the way that I think about things, because if you can write for a children's audience, then you can pretty much write for any audience. And then in my other life, I have a couple of fellowships, so I like to belong to different tribes, as it were. And because of the nature of what I do in journalism, and some of it being quite traumatic, as it were, I have a fellowship with the Dart Center for Trauma and Journalism at Columbia University, New York. So we look at elements of not just how you treat interviewees, like, if someone's been in a very sensitive situation, whether it be a shooting or whether it be something else that's difficult, even things like I'm trying to think. So, for example, if family members got dementia, that can be very difficult as well to approach. And then also in terms of journalists ourselves, how do we make sure that we take care of ourselves? So I'm involved with the Dart Center. I have a Rotary International Peace Fellowship because why not shake things up a bit? So I lived in Thailand for a bit, and I stayed with humanitarians and development workers and people who'd been in war zones, etc. And I looked at, peace and conflict resolution, because let's face it, if you're in storytelling, there's always going to be some sort of drama going on. So I do that. And then, anything that really piques my interest, to be honest with you. I've got like a cultural leaders scheme, and I've got Women of Future networks, and I've got this, that, and the other. So you can't really pigeonhole me. See, the animals again.
This is amazing. The thing that I find most amazing is, as a journalist and as a person of many interests, you see, many of us, we only get to see a little corner of the world. For example, I get to see my neighborhood, my city of Montreal, in a wider perspective, maybe Canada and the US, but the farther it goes, the more foggy it becomes. But you are in the field, you are going in depth in what's happening in the whole world day by day. So I feel like you have a whole picture of humanity at this present moment in time. And it's just fascinating to tap into your universe. But let me ask you, out of all this selection of topics that you have that grab your attention every day, what is it that drove you to write this book?
I mean, it's a very weird book. So I think that I would hope that what I just told you would explain that I like weird things, that I like the underreported. So to be fair, in my bid to try lots of different things, I ended up working in the BBC's business unit. And we have, some of the highest caliber people that are there, people who really understand business and economics and have worked in investment banks and have, degrees and masters and all that stuff. I don't have any of that background. What I was hired for is because I can tell stories and I can make difficult subjects relatable. So in terms of the book coming about, there are two elements. One, I was in a position where I was immersed in the world of business, much like your podcast, for example. You talk about finance, you talk about investments, etc., all the time. So you're coming across these people all the time. For me, I've had a degree of I guess false imposter syndrome, because I was like, what am I doing here? I'd be in meetings and I'd be like, I don't come from this background. I don't fully understand what's going on. And I knew that I wouldn't be the only person in that position, not just within the organization, but in the wider world. When I was younger, when we had our qualifications at school to do, when you make choices, I'm going to study this or I'm going to study that. At one point, there was something called business studies. And I was like, oh no, business studies. I know that's for businessy people. I'm not a businessy person. But the older I've become, the more I realize that actually business and money matters. That infiltrates everything. It has very much like these, these tentacles everywhere. And so when I was in the business unit, there were a couple of meetings and they would talk about things that you definitely would know about, oh, Facebook is a unicorn. And I'd be like, what now? Unicorns. Okay, I get unicorns. I know what unicorns are. But why are we talking about it in this circumstance? Or, our then Chancellor in the UK was a hawk. And I'm like, I know what a hawk is. I know it's a bird. Don't quite understand what's going on here. And so, you know, and I was very lucky that my colleagues, you know, among me would be very generous with their time and sort of explain things. But bearing in mind, I had that false imposter syndrome in a pre-pandemic time when we would have more of a commute. I would use that time in which I would be sketching. So, you know, I'd be drawing out a unicorn in a hoodie at that point, because remember, at that point, Mark Zuckerberg was known for wearing his hoodies, you know, and I'd be drawing a very stern-looking hawk and other creatures that would come up. Because when you start on this journey, and I'm sure you've had the same thing, having looked through the book, the minute you start, you're like, oh, hold on a minute, what about this? What about cash cows? Cash cows come up, and that's used from a very young age. You know, that's in very common parlance. And so that's pretty much how the book came about, in that it was a research project. And I'm very lucky in that, you know, at that point you could see on Instagram, so bearing in mind I have that social experience within me, what other people were looking at, what your friends were looking at on Instagram. You don't really have the ability to do that now. But I would say a lot of my friends would be liking the pictures of a guy who I'd never actually worked with internally within the BBC before, but he's also a BBC journalist, and his name's Dominic Bailey. And so I went up to him, and I think, you know, sometimes I do tell people this, and that's a little bit strange what you did. I just messaged him out of the blue, and I went, hello, we don't really know each other, but I've got an idea. Do you want to join? Like, I still don't understand why to this day he just didn't go, you're so strange. He just went, yeah, actually, you know, and have you thought about this? And what about cockroaches? And because cockroaches, the cockroach portfolio comes up, you know what I mean? He started getting more and more immersed. And I think because we allowed each other to experiment and have fun with the terms. So I'd go away and I'd research, and maybe I'd do a basic sketch for some of them, not all of them. And then I'd say to him, oh, I've come across this, you know, what can you do? And, you know, he has a very beautiful way of illustrating the creatures. So for example, I'll give one example, the skunk works, so that, you know, the term skunk works relates to an experimental group, and you would have that in bigger companies like Amazon or Google, etc. And it emerged from the company Lockheed Martin when they were doing war things, and experimenting, and it's a really cool term, and now it's used in many different organizations, but the experiment part of it hasn't gone away. And so I said, oh, look, you know, this has come up, you know, and he came back, and I love the image of a steampunk skunk. And steampunk is all about design and innovating and experimenting. So we've got some, you know, a clever pun there, as it were. And then you've got a skunk, and it's rhyming, and it's great. So you've got the steampunk skunk, and in other animals, as I said, some of them are very literal, like a cash cow. You've literally got a cow with cash symbols from around the world on it. You know, you've got the bear, the bear, which was one of clearly the first terms, because people say a lot about bear markets, but not everybody understands what a bear market is. I certainly didn't. You've got the bear at a market, so that's very literal in that respect, you know. So that's where it all emerged, from that degree of false imposter syndrome, being surrounded by people who knew what they were talking about, and me being at the very start, at the periphery, as it were, and being like, hold on a minute, there's something here, and I can't find a book like it. That's the other thing. I looked, because I was like, is there like a you know, a book for dummies that is about animals, to be perfectly frank with you, because that's an easy way of getting into it. We all love, you know, Sir David Attenborough and his documentaries. We all love nature, let's face it. I can't think of anyone who hates nature. So that's how that came about. But it wasn't easy, because to be honest with you, some people were like, this is a really simple idea. This is not the smartest idea you've had. And I was like, I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying it doesn't exist. And I think there's a demand for it. You know, so if not everybody necessarily got it at first, they're like, why would you do this? And I think sometimes you've got to have that. For me, the lesson is, don't just, like, you know, put your nose up at something when you think it's really simple. Right now, and I'm super proud of it, we've got children all the way up to proper businessy people who really like it. So when, you know, our publishers would be like, so who's the you know, what's the market? Who are your competitors? I'll be like, I don't know. There aren't any, because there's no book like this out there. It was really difficult to market in that respect. And I'm sure with all, you know, with your guests that you've had previously, for example, they'll have gone through that same process. Bearing in mind, this is my first book. I didn't know how it all operated at all. Everything we've been doing, we've been making up as we go along, because we've not kept to any convention whatsoever. But like I said, I'm really intrigued. What's your favorite animal out of out
Well,
the book.
first of all, before we get about my favorite animal, I had to say for the listeners, I mean, well, this is, it has plenty of illustrations of animals and this and that with an explanation. But I mean, if anyone is gonna get this book, don't get the Kindle version, get the paper version. I mean, because it's almost like the difference when you go to a museum, seeing a painting there in its splendor, or seeing the same painting in digital format. It's just not. I mean, it's a, you can relate one with the other one, but the experience is totally different. And if part of my research that I do whenever I interview someone is that I go to their Amazon reviews. And I was disappointed that I didn't find any one-star reviews because I always have fun with them. And, you know,
Thanks.
I can poke the author and say, well, you know, what about this? That, but there was none. But I hear, I will read some of the ones that I read. This one says, it's a great gift for a business person who has everything. So imagine, you know, you rich uncle, he has already all the cars and all the houses, but he doesn't have an illustrated guide of all the stock market terms. Another person said it's a fun coffee table book. I mean, it's just an amazing gift for yourself and for your friends or whatever. It really, really is fun. I have never called a book fun in any of my podcasts before. Yeah, I don't know. I like the chicken. I consider myself a chicken investor. You know, like I hesitate before making a jump, and sometimes I do all the research and then I pull out at the last moment. I like that one. But many people are familiarized with some of the familiar terms like piggy bank, loan sharks, the rat race. What are some of the most unfamiliar terms that you had to go and dig deep to find out this term? Oh, this is very uncommon, and then the meaning that that it has.
It's interesting that actually you mentioned the piggy bank because yes, it's a very common term, but one thing that was super surprising to me was the history of it, the etymology of it, as it were, in terms of the fact it goes back, I think, to the 1400s, where actually it's around. There's a word which is pig, Pygg, which means earthenware pot, and that's where the word piggy bank came from. Because going from the earthenware pot, the designers later on then took that word pig, which was relating to the earthenware pot, and then fashioned it after the farmyard animals. So that in itself was a bit of a surprise, despite the fact it is a common term. And when I do speak to others about it, again, they're like, that's quite interesting. And same, you know, with the gift horse, which you use not just in business but elsewhere, and how people would how the term emerged was from like counting the teeth of a horse to see like what have you actually got, like how old is it, how valuable is it. But other terms that, you know, actually, because this came out as the pandemic was emerging around the world, so we were basically in the last stage of getting everything finalized, getting the manuscript across. So at the very last minute we added a term in order to make sure that it was as up to date as possible, and that was hamster calf. And hamster calf is where we have a picture of a hamster, so this rodent, in a shopping trolley with its mouth full of the toilet rolls. And why? Because clearly at that point in time, and we've seen surges of that, this German term, hamster calf, which means hamster purchase, and it relates to stockpiling. That people were very concerned about global supply chains, because as lockdowns were emerging because of the virus, all this stockpiling was going on. So that was a very surprising term to come across, and then think we need to include this because it's not just happening in one country. This is pretty much happening all over the world. I mean, another one that came up, which is actually relating to rodents again, is the guinea pig director. So that's a more archaic term, but the reason why we decided to include it, and again, the image that we have there that Dominic created is the back of a guinea pig, and it's sitting in a film director's chair. So again, very, very simple word associations that you've got. And the guinea pig director goes back to the olden days when somebody would put in a guinea, so a coin, as it were, and they would have a say in a company. So for us, it was important to include because it's very similar to things like non-executive directors now, silent directors. So we made it a lot more relatable in that respect. So those sort of terms that came up were very interesting. I mean, even again, when you take the familiar terms like the bear market, which, you know, means a fall of 20% or a long-term decline over 2 months, it was interesting to take the elements from the research where you realize that actually the word bear in relation to finance, I think, just double check, you know, it came about, the first time was around 1709 with Richard Steele's Tatler. That was the first time that you've got it in that the dictionaries refer to. And that's really like, oh my gosh, it's been around for that long time. And even again, the origin story, nobody can quite agree on the origin story. People are like, oh, does it go back to when the bears and bulls were pitted against each other? And so that's what people would see outside the stock exchanges, as it were, you know. But what I found really helpful, and when this book goes to children, which it has, as I said, it's been picked up, you know, I've seen 4-year-olds with it. They don't necessarily need to know the exact words at that point. It's more about them not being scared of business or finance, because they're like, oh yeah, I've been exposed to it since I was very young. But we do say, so say a parent is, for example, reading with their children, the kid can enjoy the picture, and then we say a bear when it's fighting, it swats its paws down. So that's how you remember that a bear market goes down. A bull, it has its horns go, you know, they swipe up. And that's how you remember. If you see in the headlines, and we're seeing this on a daily basis, to be perfectly frank with you, you'll know that. So again, it's about these young ones not being afraid of it. They don't need to know the words right now, but it could be in like 3 years' time, they just pick up a small book. I know that somebody said it's suitable for a coffee table, but I'm like, it'll have to be a very small coffee table. You know, it's one of those books that can pretty much fit in your bag. It's relatively small. They can pick it up and be like, oh, I'll just read that, you know, it's fine, I'll just look at the pictures. And then as they get more immersed, as they're older, they're like, oh yeah, I know what a bear market is, and you know, I'm not going to be scared of that. Whereas, to be perfectly frank with you, I used to be scared of these terms because I didn't know them, I didn't understand them. That was a whole exclusive world that I had nothing to do with. Our book is also about financial literacy. Like, you know, one of the things that I came across was that there was this huge global survey, and only 1 in 3 people around the world said that they felt comfortable with financial concepts. That's really quite worrying, you know, when everyone's got pensions or are supposed to have pensions, when you've got like the markets, whatever they do will somehow affect you at some point, whether it's, you know, retail, it's shops, you know, the internet, etc. And for me, if parents and children, or, you know, schools or libraries, somebody goes in, they're not scared about asking questions about what's happening with their money because they've seen a book like this, it's a success. You know, even if, like, you know, we're not selling, we're releasing a book in a pandemic has not been easy, if I'm perfectly frank with you. You know, it's not easy at all, especially a book like this, which, as you say, the hard copy is far more beautiful, and, you know, the paper they've given us is amazing quality. It's the sort of book you'd pick up in a store. Right. And the stores are shut right now, you know. But as I said, going back to my point, the book is as far as I'm concerned, it's a success because it's making people less afraid of business.
So I have 2 more questions. First of all, who helped you? Were you asking journalists or business people or stock traders or a melange of everyone?
That's exactly it. It's a menagerie. It's a lot of people. So at the back of the book, we do acknowledge quite a few people because, as I said from the beginning, I am not a business expert. I am not a finance expert. If you want to speak to me, definitely speak to me about animals, but I can't talk to you about, you know, different things like credit and there's a whole, you know, there are lots and lots of other books of jargon, to be honest, that need to demystify things. So we would go through and we checked with other journalists, we checked with journalists with economic backgrounds, we checked with etymology experts, I checked with people who had done things around labor, for example. So it's all about, is this relatable? Also, what was really important for us was making sure that these terms had been used, that they weren't just terms that we were making up, or one person had said, that they had actually appeared somewhere, and other people had taken them up. So that was quite important, like the Anaconda mortgage, for example, which is very American. You don't really actually think about that in the UK, but that's about, you know, you don't really want to be squeezed by the clauses that come with this mortgage at the end of the day. So you've got, for the picture, you've got an anaconda squeezing a house. So that's the simple, very simple definition. The whole point is for this book to be a primer. It's never going to have everything in it. The phrasing itself that we've put in, it's very brief. You've read it, they're very brief paragraphs. This book is not going to take you more than an hour and a half to read, let's face it. Yeah, even then I'm being generous and including tea breaks and biscuits and other things that you must have when you're reading a book. But we made sure that everything was checked over. We spoke to traders, we spoke to people who actually understand investments, etc., and said, the chicken investors, are we getting it right here? The dead cat bounce. As a starter guide, is this a good starter guide in that respect? So I think that's why the reviews especially have been quite strong, and in terms of where it's appeared, like for example Money Week did a review as well. It's got the credibility there rather than here's something that's just a little bit throwaway, and I think that's super important that we did do those checks.
One last question. So many stock traders are also known for using obscene terms. Are there any terms that you decided, well, that's too graphic, maybe that doesn't belong in my book? Do you find yourself in that situation?
Well, we're very lucky in that we didn't come across many sort of dirty animals, as it were. So bearing in mind that, as I said, for one of the reasons we actually didn't go for the self-publishing route, which we were thinking about, we went for a more traditional publishing route and spent 4 years looking for a publisher. I don't have an agent, so I found this book deal by myself, as it were, with a lot of hard work, is because the end goal was always for schools and libraries. So had we come across those elements, we would have thought quite carefully about it being suitable for an introductory guide. As I said, that's all this is. It's an introductory guide. I mean, there are definitely terms around. I'm not going to say there aren't, but for us, they needed to be of value in order to be included. And I think when you've got more obscene terms, sometimes they're there for the derogatory element rather than the actual learning element. And I think for us, that's why we thought very carefully about what to include and what not to include. I mean, there are more than 130 terms, that we've come across, and we have more than that. So the book doesn't have everything that we've come across. Like our spreadsheets are bulging, as it were. So it's interesting. As I said, once you start on this, it's very hard to stop.
Well, I have to tell you, I have been reading about the stock market and business terms for more than a decade, and I was surprised with so many terms that I didn't know, but I'm happy to discover. So, well, my last question, of course, is where can people find the book and where can they follow you?
You can follow me everywhere. No, not at home. Please don't follow me at home. No, the book is actually available globally. I was super pleased, actually. One of my friends was in Kenya, in Nairobi, and he actually managed to track down a copy. So I was super happy about that. But definitely, so it was published in a staggered way, which again, I'm learning a lot about how publishing works. It's a whole new ball game for me, the learning out of marketing. So in most of the world, it's already out. If it's not out, then you can definitely pre-order it because it will be out from April onwards in the parts where it hasn't yet been out. But yeah, you can go on the internet, find a good bookstore. It doesn't have to be a major bookstore. It can be an independent bookstore. You can ask them to order it, and it is available right now. It's actually not that expensive, by the way. We made sure to make it at a retail price that was affordable because the whole point is about accessibility. So in the UK, it's actually less than in the UK, it's less than 10 quid. And I check with my dad every time I see it in a different country. And he's like, yeah, you're about the sort of same pricing with the UK one. So I'm pretty happy about that. And in terms of where I can be followed, when the internet first started and social first started, there actually weren't that many Dhruti Shahs. There's quite a lot now, which is slightly weird. But I'm on Twitter at Dhruti Shah, and I'm around on Facebook. I don't use it as much apart from for news gathering. And I'm on LinkedIn. I actually do a lot more activity, especially work-wise, on LinkedIn. So I'm definitely around there. So, do feel free to look me up, as it were. But my key thing is thank you, by the way. Thank you so much for inviting me on your podcast and talking about the book, because it is fun. We're in a time where I think we need to be serious. We're in a post-COVID economy, as it were. But also we need to have a little bit of fun and a little bit of light relief in order to be able to navigate the post-COVID economy. So I really appreciate you inviting me onto your podcast, considering the caliber of speakers that you have. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. Well, just one last word for the listeners. Please do yourself a favor and get the paper copy. And the other thing is that book retailers, they love it when customers ask them for books, because they are not aware of everything that people that has demand. So if you don't go and say, hey, what about this book, why don't you bring it here, they are delighted to know what is it that clients want, so they can buy that supply and just offer it to the general public. Dhruti, thank you so much for being here, and good luck.
Thank you.